Welcome to the Why Music podcast, where we talk to independent artists about their journeys, the inspirations behind their music, and ultimately why they make music. This next artist is a Nashville creative with a passion for blending genres of all kinds, taking influence from all kinds of music, including R&B and emo. You never know what to expect from him. Already releasing new music in 2023, he's only just getting started. Welcome, JM.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much.
So I always like to kick things off with getting a little background on how your journey with music kind of all started.
hmm So I would say probably started it around age 5. Was always just kind of like tampering around with the keys at home and stuff. And I think my parents kind of took notice a little bit. That maybe I had a little bit of rhythm. So they kind of signed me up for piano lessons from a very young age. So I kind of started out just doing classical piano and really did that throughout my whole childhood and all the way up until I left for college, pretty much. So kind of started off with a big classical piano background, and then kind of got interested in jazz and kind of the more improvisational space. And because I wasn't a big music theory person, I kind of like to just go by ear. So I got into jazz, and then that kind of snowballed into me getting into hip hop and then wanting to produce. And yeah, and then I kind of just got sick of like begging artists to get on my stuff. So I just started hopping on my own stuff, and yeah, here we are. And yeah, trying to make it work as an artist.
So when did you kind of transition from that, oh, I'm like taking piano lessons, I've got this huge classical thing going on, to like writing your own stuff? Like, did that start with the piano as well, or was like lyrics like
Mm.
a separate thing? Like, where did that kind of come in?
Writing my own stuff was kind of it was there throughout the entire process. Even as a kid, and I was playing like these classical songs, I would try to always like put a spin on it in my own way. I would always try to either play it faster or slower, add, like these notes, just to make it interesting, I guess. And so yeah, that kind of carried into everything I did after that point. And I played in my church pretty often, so that was a good outlet to kind of express that creativity and just kind of like compose on the spot. So that's kind of always been a part of it. I think creating music has always kind of been in me. And yeah, I was always kind of like making up arrangements on the piano and just doing stuff strictly musically for the purpose of creating and I guess kind of exploring that curiosity rather than just like going along with whatever was in front of me. I think I always wanted to kind of venture out and do that. So yeah, I think that's why I'm where I'm at now with what I'm doing for sure.
I mean, what's the fun in just playing what's written on the page, right?
Right, right.
It's just too easy that way.
Yeah.
Um,
The drive my instructor is crazy.
Oh yeah. I mean, I took piano lessons as well, and my piano teacher she was very, I did not take lessons for the sake of playing classical music. Like, the first real song I ever learned was Someone Like You by Adele, but I would always do, like, at least with the left hand, like my own thing with things. And she called it like
Mhm.
Avaing the songs at that point, and she loved it. So it worked for me. Um, but yeah, it's too boring to do it. And maybe like we can do it better than how it was originally written, you know?
Exactly, exactly.
Um, so now, like, coming from the kind of well-rounded like artist perspective and not just a musician, not just a producer, when it comes to writing your songs, do you find that there is common themes that or common things that even inspire what you write about?
Um, I think I've always been a pretty like emotional kid. So I mean, I think that's where it definitely comes from. I think ever since a young age, I've always like had really intense emotions and just never was good at verbalizing that. So I think music was like the easiest and most concise way for me to like put it out there how I'm really feeling, and to try to get people to understand that, I think. So yeah, it's always come from a pretty emotional place. And I think as I've gotten older and kind of had more life experience, and just gone through more just like real shit in life, it's definitely still been that, just kind of, in different contexts.
Do you think that um like kind of approaching it from that very like personal perspective, very emotional perspective, do you find that you kind of take it as like a in the moment kind of dealing with it kind of way, or is it more of like this I've dealt with it, it's more of just like an afterward expression kind of like
Mm,
what's the word I'm looking for, like a reflection type of process?
that's a really good question. And that's something I'm still like really struggling to like find the balance with. Um, but I think the first few songs I put out, of those few songs, most of them are pretty heavy, and I think it's because I wrote those kind of in the midst of all that emotional mess, and not really as much after
Hmm.
like reflecting. I'm really like um kind of in the moment when I'm writing some of these songs, at least the ones that I've kind of put out so far and that I'm gonna put out in the near future. Um, Sometimes it's after when I have a little more clarity. Um, but yeah, most of the time I feel like it does come from like in that moment, and that's why it tends to be more kind of like heavy emotional, and yeah, that kind of thing. But it's hard to find I know you're a songwriter too, so maybe you've like experienced this, but it's hard to find that balance sometimes, I think. Like, sometimes maybe you're writing a song and you think to yourself, like, am I just venting right now? Or am I like writing a song that people are gonna listen to? Like, do I need to hop off Logic and like talk to a therapist? Or so yeah, it's definitely a balance that I'm new to trying to navigate. So
Yeah, I mean, with art, it's such a personal kind of thing, and it's essentially just a form of expression. So, kind of finding that border between is this just me coping or is this me like creating is not
yeah.
always the easiest thing. Yeah, but I mean, I
Yeah.
do think that the more in the moment you can be with like writing, the better it kind of turns out. At least the more like personal and it, the more the better you think it turns out, at least. Like sometimes like if you're
Yeah.
telling the story a year or two after the fact, you turn it into a song, that might be what people love, but it's not going to necessarily, it might not have that same connection to you personally because it's like, this was so like 2020 me. What are we doing here?
Yeah, exactly. That's like kind of the risk reward that goes with it. Um, because you can just kind of, pour all of that out in the moment and then be in a
Hmm.
completely different space, like even just like a month later and be like, ooh, like this is where I was at. But I don't think it's the worst if you're a songwriter and you're going through things and writing songs to cope. I don't think that's the worst coping mechanism out there.
No.
But I think you just when you're taking an audience into account, that's when um you kind of have to think about it a little bit. Like, is this, too much like my story to where nobody's gonna be able to relate, or have it kind of hit them. So yeah, yeah.
And do you think there's any sort of like catch 22 in the opposite way where it's like when you're writing it in the moment that you kind of heighten it in your own eyes? Like you kind of think because it's like, oh, like I got all this out and put it into this song and it is kind of that like emotional rewarding experience. Do you ever think that like you then kind of heighten the quality of the song in your own eyes? Just kind of like looking at it like, oh, like this is really good when it's really like mid at best.
For sure. Yeah. 100%. I'm so embarrassed of like some of the like demos I've shown friends and stuff,
Mm-hmm.
just like written like in those terrible moments where like I said, like I should have just been talking to someone and not like sitting on Logic and cooking up beats. But uh yeah, I think you gotta be careful because if you have that kind of temperament, it definitely can kind of cloud your objective vision of like, okay, what actually is this song? You know, how is this going to um, hit people when they
Mm-hmm.
hear it? So yeah, I think for me, it's worked a couple times, but I think there are also times where it doesn't work, and I think I'm just going through that trial and error phase right now, and yeah, trying to figure that out and find that balance.
Yeah, there definitely is got to be some sort of balance to it, and I mean, we do. I mean, certainly, I'm from an emotional perspective, take things in a different light than what the quality might actually be, just because
Hmm.
we have that personal attachment to it.
Yeah.
Like, there's songs I've been sitting on for years that I'm like, I need to put it out because like I wrote it and I've liked it like all this time, but it's like I'm looking at it and I'm like, what are we doing here? Like, it wasn't even necessarily from
Yeah.
an emotional place. It was just like I can picture myself writing it. I remember that whole kind of experience, but it's like
Hmm.
she's not as good as we think she is. So we just kind of need to keep her on the back burner for now.
Yeah. Yeah. I
Um,
think, I mean, emotion in songwriting, it's like a great thing. And I think, that and like vulnerability is to me, and what I value in music and making music, that's probably the most important thing. But um, yeah, there's definitely got to be kind of
checks and balances.
you got to have some kind of clarity, you know? Yeah.
Yeah, it's a tricky process, but if you had to create a new genre or like redefine like kind of just like a new like genre title essentially around what your music is, kind of like a genre of one, what would you call it?
I think I'd call it emo R&B. Sounds wild, but I think um a couple of the songs I've come out with are a little closer to R&B on that spectrum, I think.
Hmm.
Um, but I think the upcoming EP is gonna be it's definitely R&B influenced, but a little too aggressive to be R&B. So I think that's the pairing I would go with. And yeah, that's what I would call it, I think.
So I mean, you have your kind of balance in that. We just need to find it on the songwriting side of things now.
Yeah, for sure.
um, then kind of on that same note, of the like songs you've already put out, that you is there one in particular that you think best embodies who you are as an artist? Like if you had to show somebody just one song to sell them on you as an artist, what would the song be?
Uh for me, I think that'd be Paralyzed. Um I think from like a production standpoint and just like the lyrics, the tone of the vocals, um, that's definitely a sound I would like to kind of run with a little bit. Um, but I mean, the one I just came out with is like much closer to the emo side of things, whereas Paralyzed is closer to R&B. So I'm constantly kind of bouncing back
Between
and
the
forth
two?
between those two. But I think Paralyzed was probably like the most me as an artist. And I think that's the one I sat down and really worked on and put the most thought into. So yeah, and just seeing people's reaction to it. Um, I think that definitely I think I was the best version of myself when making that song. Best version of myself as an artist. So yeah.
Do you think that's an accurate depiction of kind of where you're continuing to like progress towards? Like, do you think that's a not only a sign of, hey, this is like the best thing I've done so far, but it's like there's only more of this to come?
Ooh, it's yeah, that's tricky. It's so hard to say. Um, yeah, I never have any idea how like a song is gonna sound or like what kind of
Hmm.
song I'm gonna make before I make it. So I wouldn't want to tell you, this is what the rest of my stuff is gonna sound like. But I think more the energy behind it and like the energy of the song rather than just the pure uh sound aspect of it, I think.
No,
Um,
absolutely. We can't pigeonhole ourselves into one particular sound. Otherwise, there's not really much kind of room for growth. If you catch yourself making something 5 years from now that sounds just like what you're doing now,
mhm.
you either have a very, very strong brand as an artist or you are just walking in circles.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, it can I feel like it helps and hurts sometimes.
mhm,
It's kind of easier to like, go after that like niche audience if you kind of have a specific sound that they're looking for.
right.
But if you're kind of all over the place, then it's a bit harder to figure out where to look and channel all that stuff. So, I'm just kind of throwing stuff at the wall and seeing what sticks at this point. But yeah, I'm
And
having fun with it, and I definitely don't want to like pigeonhole myself into any specific sound.
no, I think that's also just kind of the best way to do it. Like, the best thing that an artist can do for themselves is to create what feels natural. It'll be more like effective, like time wise. Like, you'll be plugging out more rather than spending all this time trying to sound like something.
Hmm.
And it'll just be more true to you, which will make it more connectable, if that's even a word, for people listening. Like, the truer you can be, the
Yeah.
better off you will be.
100%. Yeah, that's a really good point. I definitely find that when I'm sitting down and just like ruminating on lyrics, like, oh, like what are they gonna think when they hear this line and that line? Like that doesn't lead to my best music. Like it's always when I'm just in kind of the flow state and just letting it happen. So yeah, I think that's a really important thing to kind of be aware of as an artist.
I mean, the fans matter because that's what's going to kind of progress you forward, but
Hmm.
they aren't the end all be all. You're not writing music for that specific person. That those people will come to it
Hmm.
naturally on their own. Can't force somebody to listen to something in particular. You kind of just have to let it happen.
100%. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, when we listen to any artist we enjoy listening to, they're telling their story, you know?
Hmm. At least
So
they should be.
they should be, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Um, so yeah, I think that the better you're able to tell your own story, I think the better other people are going to be able to relate to that authenticity and connect with it on an even deeper level. So,
Yeah. People find community in specificity. So
mm,
that's exactly how it needs to be. Just
the
tell the
gem.
story,
Yeah.
people will understand. We're all experiencing the same humanly things, just with with different characters, different timelines, all that good stuff. But at the
Hmm.
end of the day, the specific detail is what's going to make the actual connection with somebody else. So, if you had to pick 2 to 3 artists that you think your music kind of sounds like a combination of, who would you pick?
Ooh, gosh.
Jumping all over the place here.
Yeah, ooh, that's a tough one. Um, I think at least right now, this album has definitely some hyper pop influence.
Hmm.
There's this artist called Breakins that I've been listening to a lot lately, and yeah, that vibe is definitely really prevalent in my stuff right now. So I would say Breakins, and then I think Joji would be another one. Um, I guess in terms of like the songwriting and like production style. Ooh, it's really hard to say though, because it's just such a mashup of so many different influences, you
Good.
know?
Good.
It's
That
hard to
it should be.
it's yeah, it's hard to point to one specific, artist and say that's it.
Yeah.
But yeah, I don't know. People say like Weekend sometimes. Like I don't know if I really see that, but um maybe. I don't know. Just sad R&B people, I guess.
Fair enough. Fair enough. Um, are there any outside passions, like non-music related things, like in your life that you think impact who you are as an artist?
Hmm. Um, I would say I think growing up in church and having kind of a sense of faith kind of forces me to look at myself in a more objective way and kind of be more introspective and kind of hold myself accountable, I guess. So that comes across in my songwriting when I'm kind of breaking down these things that happened to me that were bad, but also maybe kind of reflecting on how some of it may have been my fault or something I may have done differently, I guess. So yeah, just having that inner moral compass, I guess, that came with uh growing up in a faith environment where there was a lot of self-reflection. I think it forced me to be pretty self-aware, I think. So I think that definitely translates into my songwriting. In terms of a hobby, I mean, um, I do like kickboxing and stuff, and I'm really like kind of into that world. Um, and it that for me is like a good release. So yeah, I don't know. I think maybe some of the aggression comes from that. I don't know. But yeah, there's definitely a lot at play, some that I'm aware of and a lot I'm sure that I'm not really aware of that's impacting how I'm writing these songs. But yeah.
Do you think that sort of self-awareness influences like how you view your own music? Do you think it makes you more of
Mhm.
your own worst critic, or do you think that it kind of makes you go with what's natural? Like, how do you think that that kind of feeds into the actual process?
It again helps and hurts for sure. So being self-aware helps because I can listen to a song and listen to what I'm saying, and I can gauge more easily if this is like, okay, I'm being like overly dramatic right now, or I'm not um maybe being vulnerable enough or sharing this in the way I should share it. But at the same time, like you said, that inner critic is a huge part of what holds me back as an artist and putting stuff out. And like the past two songs I've put out, there have been so many instances where I've thought to myself, okay, I'm like not gonna put these out. Like I'm just like projecting right now or whatever. And but I mean it's like if it's good music, it's good music. So sometimes I think with that being like overly self-aware, sometimes that can hinder me from putting stuff out when it's like really vulnerable, I guess. Definitely makes you overthink and be more cautious when it comes to getting that stuff out there, I think. So yeah, it can make you your own worst enemy, but it can also help you.
No, I think we need self-awareness to a point. Oh, I mean, let me put it this way. Self-awareness and then like a self-consciousness, I feel like are two different things. And the self-awareness is what you
Mm,
kind of want to aim for. Because if you're not self-aware, then you're going to be putting out any random piece of crap that you write.
yeah,
Because
yeah.
not everything that we write, whether we want to believe it and admit it or not everything we write shouldn't see the light of day. There's a lot of
Hmm.
things you have to write a lot of bad shit to write the good shit. And so you just have to have that sort of self-awareness. Like, is this really as good as I think it is? Or did I just have this total like dopamine kind of high when I wrote it? And
Yeah.
then like it turns into self-consciousness. Sometimes it's like, oh, I don't think any of this is really worth putting out. I've changed several times the songs that are going on the album that I'm working on right now. Several times. It's gone from 8 songs to 12 songs, back to 10, back to
Oh
12,
man.
like
Yep.
all over the place. I've written new stuff in the last week that'll be on there that shouldn't have been, but here we are. Um, but that self-consciousness kind of sometimes limits us from pushing out stuff that might actually be worthwhile. So there is like a very thin line between that self-awareness and self-consciousness, and even between self-awareness and just
Hmm.
ego, and
Yeah.
self-awareness is a very thin line between ego and self-consciousness. And
Mm,
that is ultimately what needs to be achieved. Easier
100%.
said than done. Absolutely easier said than done.
Yeah. That's why I also think it's so important to have good people around you, and I'm really thankful to have those people around me that know me well as a person and can listen to my stuff and have a very objective view. Like, have someone tell me like, nah, you're tweaking, you need to put this out. Or like, this isn't really as great as you think it is. So yeah, that's a huge thing. Like it's I don't think the best strategy as an artist is to just go it alone and just, completely rely on your own ear, because sometimes it can lie to you. So
Exactly. And I think that kind of even leads into like a lot of times that a lot of people that I've spoken to on here have said that like the songs that sit at the top of their profile as their like most popular ones are one of their least favorites. Like their favorite might
yeah.
not even be in the top 5 because it's like we have a different personal attachment because we were 100% involved in this creative process in putting this together. So being able to kind of reflect on it in a way of being like, oh, this is like my best thing. It might not be your best thing. It
Yeah.
might just be your favorite, but it also might be your best thing, but everybody else's favorite. This is why we need that sort of like outside input when it goes into the process because relying completely on your own, you get a little biased.
Hmm. Yeah, that's funny. That's funny because yeah, like the second song I ever put out, I liked it at the time when I put it out. And now it's like my most popular song. It's like my most streamed song. I had the most reception from it, and I cannot stand it. Like right now, I just cannot stand to listen to it.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, like it's it's crazy how we can convince ourselves um of how good or not good we think a song is and how off we can be in that.
Yeah. Essentially, you just kind of need that outside input because the brain is, as much as it is a great tool, it is also sometimes the worst tool.
Mhm.
So as far as like the fan kind of perspective goes, this is perfect lead in we just had. Um, what do you think is kind of the ideal listening scenario or situation for someone to listen to your music? And I know that can vary from track to track, but just kind of like an overall paint the picture of like what the situation is.
um I would say it would be the same as um the situation I was in while writing the songs. I think if somebody's in that state of mind, then those songs are gonna resonate really deeply. Um, I think it's a pretty specific kind of thing. I think for me it was just kind of this inexpressible frustration, uh, anger, sadness, depression. And this doesn't go for, necessarily all my music or where I might end up going in the future, but I think creatively right now that's kind of the vibe. So yeah, I think people that may be like struggling working through those emotions and just kind of need like that release and need somebody to speak to what they're going through. I think that's that would kind of be the optimal time to listen. Yeah, it's definitely, at least as it stands now, it's not for people like who have their shit together.
Well, I think that sums it up
So
right there. My music is for the people that don't have their shit together.
yeah,
I think
yeah,
that,
exactly.
but I mean, there's there's music for all kinds of settings. Like, and there is no music that will fit all kinds of settings. Some people
Mhm.
make music for parties. Some people make music for you to cry to. There's everywhere in between, but nobody's hitting both of those
Yeah,
dockets. So, no, I mean, I think that's kind of a good perspective to take on it because you're you're writing music essentially for you, but in the secondary, you're writing it for the people that need it the way that you needed to write it.
yeah, and it
And
it it adds a layer of motivation because um, if you're just kind of on your own writing to process things, and then you put it out, it's cool, but it's not nearly as fulfilling as when you put something out and then somebody going through a similar situation reaches out to you and says, "Hey, like this is my favorite song right now, and like I've just been listening to it over and over again. Thank you for putting it out." Like that honestly, like regardless of how many streams my stuff gets, having one person say that to me is enough, like more than enough to keep me going. So yeah, yeah, it's definitely a very cool thing.
I mean, I've had multiple people say like getting that sort of response is a very motivating thing. It's like if you're just putting music out into this universe and you're not getting much back, it might be a little discouraging. But if you're getting even one person to say like, and especially someone that you might not know that just kind of came across it to be like, thank you for like doing this. Like I needed this. Why would you ever stop?
Yeah,
Why would you ever stop? You know?
of course. Yeah, it just affirms all those thoughts that float around in your head. Like, am I meant to be doing this? Like, am I actually ever gonna help anybody with this or be like of use in the world? Um, those are hard questions to wrestle with. But when you see that, it's definitely a comforting feeling, and yeah, it's powerful.
Absolutely. What do you think sets you apart as an independent artist from other independent artists? Like, what is it that makes you kind of stand out from what is a very saturated crowd?
Mm. I would say first and foremost, definitely my ear. Um, I think coming from like the producer background, and I know you come from that too, it's all about um the sound first. Um, so yeah, I don't know. I think just in life I've always wanted to have like an alternative or like outside the box outlook on things. It applies to anything, like sense of humor, uh, just the way I talk to people, and it also bleeds into music. So um when people listen to my stuff, I kind of want them to be hearing something that like kind of slaps them in the face and like jolts them and like, oh, what is this? Um, and yeah, that's also something that's not necessarily like for everybody. Some people just, kind of want like the pop radio vibe and just something that sounds familiar. But I just kind of like experimenting and just seeing what I can do and like how I can uh make people react to some crazy sounding stuff, I guess. So yeah, I think it's my ear and kind of having that intention of kind of wowing, I guess, or like I said, kind of that like punch in the face element, like ooh, like it's kind of hitting you.
Absolutely. I mean, doing something different is ultimately one of the better ways to do it, especially if it comes naturally.
Yeah,
So,
yeah. I
do you
think
think,
in like influences also, I think that's what makes every artist unique in their own right is we're all drawing from different influences, and I feel like I have a really oddly um kind of an odd array of like influences. Like I grew up in the church, so like listening to like gospel music and like Hillsong, but also, like screamo rap. So, you know, I'll put like Ella Fitzgerald and Migos on the same playlist. So yeah, I think that's what sets me apart from a lot of the other independent artists.
I mean, I think doing that in itself kind of puts you into a very clear pocket of blending genres because you are a product of your environment. And if you're putting all of those things kind of in one pot, you don't really know what you're going to get other than a big old blend of everything.
Yeah. Yeah.
So when you say R&B and emo, it makes sense now. I think we've kind of touched on this a little bit just through other questions, but what impact do you ultimately want to have with your music and with your artistry?
Mm. I think this is, I mean, it'll sound cliche, but I think I just want to inspire people. Um, and inspire in the sense of I just remember always, growing up listening to music and certain songs would just give you that burst of not energy, but just like feeling alive. Um, and just like that feeling of like getting goosebumps when you hear, maybe a certain progression or like that's the shit I live for. Like I wanna just make people feel alive, I think, through my music. And like we were talking about earlier too, also just having people being able to relate to it on an emotional level so they can maybe get to a place where, it's helping them and that they have this thing they can, relate to that um kind of like helps them realize that whatever they're going through is like not, like isolated to like just them. So yeah, yeah, I would say those are kind of the driving factors.
And I think that's kind of a great kind of mentality to have because even taking a step back and realizing, okay, the thing that I'm dealing with right now isn't just specific to me. Like you can realize that at some point, but when you're in the thick of it, it's like you feel like your world is like crashing down around you and it's like just happening to you. But
Mhm.
having something like music to kind of like even in a song, just be like telling that same story, it's like, whoa, like, wait a minute, like that shit didn't just happen to me. It's happening to like other people. Not necessarily in a way of like, I'm glad I'm not the only one suffering, but in a way of just kind of that brings a little bit of comfort, just having that sort of universal experience. Like it's if other people can have this happen and be fine, so can I.
Yeah, it's like a symbiotic relationship kind of. It's like you're working on this music to kind of process things or whatever, and then it helps you, and then it helps somebody else, and then by helping someone else, that's helping you. So yeah, I mean it's a definitely a powerful thing.
Oh, absolutely. So I think that brings us to the overarching question that is the title of the podcast, which ultimately is why music?
I'm not really good at anything else. I mean, yeah, I can't picture myself doing anything else. I think for me it's just like a really spiritual thing, I think, to just the process of creating and watching what you create come to life, and being able to speak and express yourself through that. um it's I've always found that it's just been the easiest way for me to get that stuff out. So um yeah, I think it helps me feel understood. And I think ever since I was little, that's a big part of what I've always wanted, is just like to be like understood, like whatever's going on like inside of me, I just want that out there, and for like to be understood, I guess. Yeah.
Everybody wants to be understood, so that's completely understandable.
Yeah. But yeah, also like I'm horrible at math, I'm horrible at science. Like I'm gonna be on the street if I'm not doing this. So
That's one way to put it for sure. No, I think some people are just I think there's something for everybody that you're just like naturally drawn to and supposed to do. Not everybody does it, but I I mean, if like you said, if you're not good at anything else, kind of have to do something, right?
for sure. For
But
sure. Yeah. So if this doesn't work out, I guess it'll be an interesting it'll be an interesting time.
we'll
But
see what happens. We'll check back in a couple of years.
yeah, yeah, for sure.
All right. Well, that brings us to the end of this episode of the Why Music podcast. Check back again next week for another conversation with another independent artist. Thanks for listening.